Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I'm here with my fellow critiquers, Dave, Julie, Ed, and Jen. And we have our writer today with us. This is Sareen. Tara's from the Boston area. She's a great writer and nutritionist. We are posting her information on our website, so please take a look. But I just needed to add that Tara writes articles for different wellness sites, and she just wrote an article a few days ago that went out and has already gotten 11,000 hits. So it's amazing. So please do take a look at our website to learn more about her. So today Tara's given us an excerpt from a middle grade novel, and it's called The Missing Bracelet, and Julie is going to read it for us.
The Missing Bracelet. Nearing their destination, Mr. Field caught sight of a small bookstore, a hole in the wall, along a quaint little street, not unlike those found in beach towns everywhere. In fact, this street appeared more like a winding path covered with cobblestones, lined with sleepy little shops, all connected to each other like a string of row houses. Each boutique offered something completely unlike the one before. An art gallery shared a common door with a candy shop. A fragrance soap store, rubbed elbows with a cigar shop. Walking this lane, the entire Field family appeared wide-eyed at their surroundings, each one feeling as if they were suddenly thrust into a different world, where smaller is better and silence is the norm. Mrs. Field led her family into the old bookstore. The screened door stuck on its rusty spring and reluctantly swung open with a high-pitched squeak. It sprang shut with a hollow thud, which echoed off the walls within, causing Miss Lily to jump. Upon entering the dark, empty enclave, Mrs. Field hesitated, for the shop was markedly different from its neighbors. The Field family stood still as their eyes adjusted to the dim surroundings. They could smell the musty scent of antique leather bindings. The wide oak planks creaked and sunk underfoot as Miss Lily quietly wandered through the aisles. The only light in the room came from a single beam of sunlight, filtering in stealthily through the long, heavy curtains, casting a thin ray of golden glow upon the dust wafting in the air. Even little Robert felt the deadened hush of his new surroundings and busied himself with a single wooden train lying randomly on the worn, low-weave rug between the bookshelves. Mr. Field was drawn to the rolled parchment maps with faded ink and brittle, stained edges. He studied the archives spread out over the heavy mahogany table underneath a cracked window on the far side of the store. Mrs. Field explored the shadowy corner labeled with the word Classics, handwritten on a crooked cardboard sign. In what appeared to be a small children's nook, Miss Lily perused the titles, eyeing each volume carefully, looking for something familiar. She slowly made her way around the shelves, squatting down to see in the dark. The tip of her index finger passed over each binding and became blackened with old dust like soot. Even the cheery splashes of primary colors that usually distinguish children's books from every other genre were somehow washed out and discolored, having the appearance of aged watercolors. Lost in her thoughts, Miss Lily wandered deeper between the bookshelves, where the light had nearly withdrawn altogether. She found herself in the dark. Rising up from the pit of her stomach, a chill overtook her, like a warning from that sixth sense that's always on guard. She knew she was being watched. A creak in the floor sounded from directly behind her. When Lily whirled around, she gasped at the sight of an old woman with raven black hair and piercing dark eyes. Miss Lily's cry of surprise echoed loudly through the dark space. "I startled you," a slow, deep voice stated plainly. Mrs. Field squinted as she sought out the silhouette of Miss Lily and felt her way through the aisles. She greeted the woman assuredly. "We are here to find a book for our daughter. Would you have any suggestions?" The woman's heavy gaze remained fixed on Miss Lily. "Well," she spoke slowly, as she gestured them back towards the dim light, "that depends on what you're looking for, now doesn't it?" It was one of those things that adults do. They ask a question without really asking a question. Miss Lily wasn't sure if she was supposed to give an answer. The dark figure turned again to study Miss Lily. She was waiting, but Miss Lily couldn't bring herself to speak. When Miss Lily finally met her stare, she saw the old woman had well-defined, arched black eyebrows as if they'd been drawn with a black magic marker. Miss Lily couldn't help but ponder them. Every kid will agree that defined eyebrows are okay, even nice, but if they're too defined, well then that's a different story altogether. Then it's freaky. And a lot of grown-up women just don't seem to know that. The lady had a gaunt face and a thin mouth that turned downward into a slight frown. Her pale, freckly collarbones protruded sharply from below her neck. This all didn't help. Miss Lily was tongue-tied. "Tell me about yourself." The lady scrutinized her. She looked from Miss Lily to Mrs. Field and then to Miss Lily again. A shadow like an instantaneous recollection passed over her eyes. She had remembered something, and Miss Lily caught it. What was that strange look, she thought, as she simultaneously grappled with the woman's command. "Go ahead, Lily." Mrs. Field tapped Miss Lily's shoulder. "Tell the lady what you like to read." Every girl knows what she likes to read. But how come when somebody asks, she just can't remember? It's sort of like asking a kid what she likes to eat, or worse, what she likes to do. These questions can hardly be answered on the spot. Miss Lily regained her composure and pulled it together as best she could. "I like fiction, and I like mysteries," she stuttered. She felt like she was one of those plastic things that when put in the oven shrink from the heat. "I like reading, about people," she stammered, and looked down at her flip-flops. She could barely see the rhinestones in the dim light. "Yes, just what I thought. All right then, come with me." The lady turned from the aisle. Miss Lily preferred to stay exactly where she was, but she grabbed Mrs. Field's hand and reluctantly followed the shopkeeper. The old woman brought Miss Lily around to the far end of the bookstore. Here she pulled out a hardcover book from a shelf under the counter. The binding was frayed and the brown leather cover was creased. There was no price tag or barcode on the book. The engraved title was worn down and barely visible from where Miss Lily stood. It resembled the rest of the place, dusty, depressing, and decrepit. Miss Lily looked up at the woman questioningly. "This book is written by a novelist who lives in these parts. In fact, her family has been here for generations. I think you'll be quite pleased with this book. Take good care of it. It is yours." Her thin white fingers extended a bookmark towards Lily. Miss Lily quickly scanned the long, thick card and stuck it between the pages. "You will not be disappointed," the lady added, pointing one of her long, knuckly fingers at Miss Lily. With that, Mr. Field pulled out his wallet, but the woman had already turned away and disappeared into the back room. The Field family stood silently, looking at one another with wide eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Field raised an eyebrow to each other and motioned towards the door, agreeing that perhaps it was best to leave. Miss Lily quietly moved towards the back room and peeked inside. The lady sat in an old rocking chair. She appeared to be sleeping. "It's definitely creepy, but kind of sad in a weird way too," Miss Lily thought to herself. She couldn't help but feel bad for the lady. Then, remembering her manners, she quietly said, "Thank you, ma'am." She was relieved that the woman had probably not even heard her. She was still unsettled by the stony voice. Just as she reached the door to exit, she heard the slow, monotone reply, "Come back again, Lily." Miss Lily shuddered from head to toe. "I don't think so," she thought. "This is the last place I'm coming back to." She tried to shake off the feeling that was slithering under her skin as she caught the swinging door behind little Robert. Out on the sidewalk, the Fields exchanged quizzical looks with one another and walked quickly to the car, relieved to be back in the bright sunshine. Miss Lily stuffed the book into her backpack and buckled her seatbelt. What next?
This is a treat to read.
What next?
I have to say right off, you give such a great sense of setting. I was right there in that bookstore.
Yes.
Beautiful language, very good sentence structure and use of verbs, and
Yeah.
I loved all that.
Thank you.
And of course, anything to do with a bookstore, I love that too.
I guess my comment would be, whose story is this? I get since it's a middle grade novel, I get a sense it's for Miss Lily, even though we have no idea how old Miss Lily is or why she's called Miss Lily. I mean, when I first saw Miss Lily, I assumed this is an elderly woman. This is like Miss Daisy.
Ah.
Okay, I had no idea that this was a child. And the first person that's named is Mr. Field. So I think, oh, this is his story. Then a little way down, Mrs. Field. Oh, I think, oh, it's her story. And I see Miss Lily. It's like, well, who knows who Miss Lily is? how old she is. Maybe it's her story. Right, so,
You know what, I have to address that, because I think we're a few pages into the book when we start this.
You're on page 15.
Oh, I was going to ask, is this the start?
Oh.
We'll proceed.
Right.
This isn't
And
the
I-
start?
and I
oh, this is
said
not
it-
the middle?
Right,
Oh,
and I
okay.
said an
Thank
you. Oh, that's
excerpt,
different.
but I should have made it clear that it was not the very beginning.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So by now, we already know.
Well, we
You've
know
met
Miss
Miss
Lily
Lily.
is 11, is
You've
she
met her
11?
family,
Ah.
and you
Right.
understand.
Oh, so this is
the-
something that's an ongoing, okay, so this
Yes.
is part of an ongoing thing. That's different.
Right.
Never mind. Yes, because I made a note to please tell us how old she is, how old little Robert
Yeah, yeah.
is. Perfect, okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, this probably doesn't make sense anyway, but just because this is the excerpt that we read, in reading it, I agree that the setting was fantastic. I mean, I was in that bookstore with them.
Yeah.
But I thought, because it's Miss Lily and cobblestones, that I thought it was taking place like 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I got to page 2, because I was picking up things like, well, this is a modern word.
Right.
You might not want to use that. It wasn't until I got to scanner, a barcode, that I was like, oh, this takes place now. But, you know, where this is, you know, maybe you've already,
Yeah.
you know, kind of established that earlier. But if this were to be the beginning, that was something that kind of stood out to me. But like I said, the language is gorgeous. I think that the tension is beautiful. I can't wait to find out what happens with Lily in the book. And just, you know, just to echo what Sue said, you know, your ability to create setting was flawless.
I'd actually still like to go back to the point of view question, though, because it seems to me that point of view drifts around in here. And a lot of this is stated as general and kind of at arm's length, when if it's a story about Lily, then it could be in her head more. And it could be that she is the one thinking it. And an example is in the middle of page 3, where it says, it's sort of like asking a kid what she likes to eat, or worse, what she likes to do. These questions can hardly be answered on the spot. That's a very general kind of thing. You know, if you want this to be in Lily's, from Lily's point of view, it could be phrased more along the lines of, Lily hated when people asked like that. You know, they always ask, you know, what do you like to eat? And she never, and I never know what to answer. And she never knew what to answer.
It's a great point.
You know, it gets her.
More specific to Lily.
Right.
And
Gets her
less
more
about
in
every
her-
kid.
it's-
Right.
Exactly. I get a feeling like we're on a wide-angle lens here.
Ah.
And if you want it to be about Lily, then maybe you zoom in
Mm.
on Lily. And
Mm-hmm.
how much of this can be told purely from her point of view.
Right. So turn that into a thought, even first person.
Exactly. That's right.
I like
Yeah,
that, then
it
you
can
can
be a
connect
thought.
with her more.
Yeah.
On that
That's
thought,
great.
I'm sorry.
Please.
On that thought, I just had two things, actually on what Ed wrote, when he read, sorry, that he said it's sort of like asking a kid what she likes to eat. That's the one place where I would have said it's sort of like asking a child.
Right.
Unless you're going to change the voice, because
Yeah,
everything else
yeah.
is more formal.
Right.
And kid is not.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, if we're sticking to that this is Miss Lily's story, on the first page that we read, when you're describing the bookstore,
Yeah.
I think it's great to have such a good, clear picture of what the bookstore is like. But because this is from Lily's point of view, once we get down to what Mr. Field is doing and what
Right.
the little boy is doing, I'm not sure you need that. But someone else might disagree. I just don't know if you're, you know, a middle grade child reading this story, if they'll get lost by the time they get to the end, or if
I'll disagree with anyone.
Yes, he will.
I think that at this, see, I don't know what the beginning of the story is like. This whole thing funneled into the store. The store is the real question here. Are they going to go back? Is it so creepy? Because he did a great creepy. It was wonderful. It was the Curiosity Shop. I don't know if you've read that or seen it.
No.
It's another one of those stores that, like, there's something going on in there. That creepy old lady in the book. Why? And she says, "I'll never come back." Of course, that means
Right.
she's coming back.
Exactly.
There's no question about it. So I thought. I thought the description of the store, the whole street, you know, the established setting, was very good. It may be a little long, and you need paragraphs. You know, this is one titanic
okay.
paragraph.
You broke up
Okay.
later, but the first page doesn't he? We helped you with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I put a couple of paragraph symbols. But the description, you got me into the store, I know it's going to be creepy. How is it going to get creepier? Well, you've got a creepy old lady, and she comes out and gives her a book. And how much, well, take the book, it's yours. Now, there's something in the book and there's something creepy about the old lady. I want to hear, and again, this is terrific. I totally enjoyed reading this. This is just fun, and it's, at this point, I'm not, Ed's concerned about whose head you're in. At this point, I'm not concerned, because everyone is being drawn into that store. And I'm there, I'm there with the store. I want to hear the conversation when they're driving home from the store. What is the reaction to that creepy old lady? Or what's in Miss Lily's head as she's driving home saying, well,
Right.
this is a creepy, I've never, and of course, she's thinking about going back into the store.
And
I
that's
wonder-
too bad, because that's where I cut it off.
I know
The
it.
chapter ends right, and I thought, I'm really running over in pages at this point, it's getting too long.
Yeah, no,
for
no.
that conversation.
That's the problem
You're
with an
right, yeah.
excerpt.
But I like the interplay of both of your ideas, though, because I think it can be somewhat more from Lily's perspective and still maintain that kind of whole picture.
It's the whole story heading toward the store. And I
Yes.
like that kind of shambling, going, heading in that direction. But you've left us, you inspired us to be curious about the store and the old lady and the book.
Right.
And if that doesn't drive you to read the rest of the story,
Yeah.
nothing will.
Right.
And I think you've got the carrot on the stick, and I'm hungry, you know.
Don't need it on books though. If I may dovetail with what Dave said, I love some of your descriptions. I put check pluses when I love beautiful language. On page 2, when you say even the cheery splashes of primary colors that usually distinguish children's books from every other genre were somehow washed out and discolored, having the appearance of aged watercolors. I said aged, I'm sorry, aged watercolors. My mother's a librarian. I love books. I love reading. I love touching books. So I was a little saddened that Lily stuffed it in her backpack. So maybe I've suggested, wouldn't Lily rub her fingers over the book and maybe crack it open? Perhaps scold Robert if he touches it or peers at it because it's her prized possession, whatever it holds.
Isn't she scared of the book though? in a
She's
way?
maybe
scared of
so.
the book.
She's
The whole
a
thing is
Maybe
good.
she can
She's
touch
not
it just
interested
to-
in the book.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
That's a-
Very
That's
turned off by
That's
how she
right.
got it.
She's
Oh,
And that
Pollyanna.
emerges later as.
Her own curiosity
later in-
builds.
She
Yes.
wasn't given a
Read
choice.
the curiosity
Right.
show.
She wasn't given a
That's right,
choice.
that's true, yeah,
This
that's
is
true.
a
She
really
wasn't given a choice.
absolute
Yeah.
oversight,
She was kind of
but
just
Yeah.
given
the,
it.
the
Yeah.
bookkeeper hands her a bookmark. She does not hand her the book.
There's a little mystery about
She
the
didn't hand her
bookmark.
the book. You need to clarify that.
Oh,
She never
show me
hands
where.
her
You know
the
what?
book. Did Lily receive the book? Did
I
she
think
lift it
she
off the
actually-
shelf? Is it heavy? Did she carry it out of the bookstore? Did she give it to Dad to carry out of the bookstore? It's an absolutely human error.
Yeah, let me
But
see.
where did I note it? I'm
I
sorry.
noted that, I noticed that too.
On page 4, a third of the way down, I said
Yeah.
have her
pulled
hand
out a
Lily the
hardcover
book.
book.
Is it heavy? Who carries it out of the store?
Yeah, yeah,
She
yeah.
made sure
She
to give her
she
a bookmark
doesn't, I noticed that too.
that she tucked in.
Oh, I see, right.
Don't doubt me.
We
You
go
know me,
from
so I
the
don't
book
trust
to
you.
the,
Yes,
you're
yes.
on it, right.
And does she immediately, as if it's a hot coal, give it to
Yeah.
Dad, give it to
Yeah.
someone, I don't want to touch it?
Hot potato.
Or
That's a
does she
great
hold it
idea.
out of reluctance or concern over
Yeah.
what this raven-haired, beady-eyed, I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
that
yeah.
description, woman is going to do if she doesn't
Right.
hold said book?
And that really
Okay.
addresses the question too, about is she scared about the book or does she
Yes.
really want it?
Right.
Yes, and you are so terrific with your description of the bookstore and your description of Robert, the trade. I liked having Robert and Dad in there, although they disappeared for most of that scene. Please be clear about the handling of the book,
Yeah,
because that will help us.
that's a great tip, thank
Okay,
you.
now, you brought up the woman, and
Yes.
to me, this is a cliche. I wrote down, she has raven black hair and piercing dark eyes.
Oh, I
wrote,
know.
of course.
Of
course she does. She has,
Do you want to have an
you know,
80s perm with light hair? No,
She has a
no.
blunt face and a thin mouth turned downward and a slight
I
front.
know.
Of course she does.
I liked it.
And
But do you
thin
know
white
how many
fingers,
times I've
long
drawn that
knuckly
thesaurus? You know,
fingers.
there's
Of
gotta be
course.
another word for this.
What's
Okay,
another word for
but-
thesaurus?
Well, she can look
Yeah.
totally
Another word
different.
for thesaurus?
But no, as
Okay.
saying she could
But
look like
middle
totally
s-
different.
You're
Middle
so
school-
right,
Maybe-
though. You're
oh.
so right, because we think of creepy
Maybe
woman,
that's okay.
right?
I like
And-
it.
and
Maybe
it's
it's
that.
okay for that age.
When I read this, I was thinking like, okay, writer's challenge, okay? Make this woman young, petite, blonde,
Perky,
and pretty.
cheerful?
Yeah.
And still make her menacing.
Except,
Oh.
well, she can't be
Oh.
that though if you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, she
Well-
can't quite be that,
Oh.
but I actually
Just-
appreciate the the critique, because there must be another way to describe her that
Yeah.
isn't so overused.
Yeah,
Well, but-
I mean, it's
I
like,
hear
okay,
you.
this
Good
is
point.
Snow White's,
Right.
evil queen,
But this is a middle school, you're right, it is cliche, but middle school kids don't
Yeah,
know that.
they don't
They
get
might
sick
not
of that.
know.
They don't know
Right.
that.
Right,
And
yeah, but
In
the
order to bring
editors and-
into the, you're adding, you're infusing.
Get it?
You're infusing
Right.
horror.
Right, you're so confused. Dave gets a bonus point, don't you, playing home?
You're infusing horror to kids who don't know that it's a cliche.
Yeah.
Right.
They
Yes.
get that sense.
They need
So you don't have
instruction.
to, you don't have to spend a lot of time describing
But you were just
horror.
about to
I would
say,
disagree though, because I write for children and have a stack of rejections like this. So to prove it, that I'm an actual writer, that
Gain strength of that.
editors and agents, if publication is what you're looking for, are looking for what hasn't been done yet.
All right.
So you
a
have to get
novel
past
idea?
the agent
Will?
and the publisher to get to the child
Right.
in the first place.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
I didn't pick
Just
up
a
on
thought.
that, Ed, but,
Right.
and I do agree with what Dave, actually disagree again with Dave about point of view.
Me?
that
You-
Middle
Oh my
grade-
God,
I know,
write that
I'm
down.
sorry.
Bonus
Because I
point for
usually-
Jen.
Because I worship Dave, so, it's weird that I ever disagree with him, but you need to stay in your protagonist's point of view, especially with the middle grade age,
Yeah.
rather than jumping around. So I would just add that out there as someone who has read every book on writing for middle grade and gone to every seminar about writing for middle grade, and have had my books critiqued by middle grade editors, that you would, I would agree with both of those points.
And something
And
I
I've
wanted
gone
to...
on way too long, I've rambled on way too long.
No. Something I just wanted to bring up was that in a few spots where Miss Lily is thinking to herself, because you used the quotes, I thought she was talking out loud until it said she thought to herself. So I know, as a group in the
Should we
past, that
there
we've talked
bring that
about...
around
Yeah, move the
first?
tag up.
You move it?
There's-
Yeah, move it around, or because she's thinking, I don't know if we
Miss
use
Lily
it...
thought.
There's controversy about this. Should
okay.
be
Right,
italics,
right,
should be
should
quotes.
be
I use quotes
italics
for
and all
wondering,
that.
I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I
So-
do.
But I don't think that, I don't know, having the
I've
quotes
done,
was...
I've done it when I've had my books critiqued by editors. They will always tell me that if it's a thought, you use the tag, but you put the words not in quotes, you put it in italics
Okay.
with the comma, and then she thought.
Okay.
Or you don't even need the she thought once you kind of
Right.
establish
That's
that all the
right.
thoughts are in
Yes.
italics.
Yeah.
Now, but like I said, you might send it to another editor and agent, and they might want it exactly how you did it.
Some-
It just threw me
Well,
off,
let them
that's
know
all.
Right.
If it were in
more
italics,
upfront.
I wouldn't have been
Yeah.
confused that she was thinking.
Right,
Even if, as
right.
Jen said, if you didn't write she thought, as long as the italics were there, then I would already know.
Yeah.
That's great for clarity,
Right.
actually, because it is hard to differentiate how someone thinks as opposed to what they say. So
Yes,
that's a good
true.
way to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, here's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. I just want to segue, sorry.
Sure.
How far away from the shop did they park? Because it seemed to go right to their car. Where were they headed next? Because it says, first sentence of this excerpt, nearing their destination, Mr.
Right.
Field caught sight of a small bookstore, not the bookstore they were headed to. So what is their destination, and where are they going next? Were they moseying along? Had they intended to come upon this? They do want a book for their X number year-old daughter, but that wasn't their intention, you're saying. You're indicating with your eyes.
Yeah, so
Well,
that
because
is
you're
in
in-
the
right.
preceding paragraphs, we talk about why they even end up there. It's not something they had
Thank you.
intended to do.
Okay.
But the Mr. and Mrs. Field insist, like my husband and I do, a lot of parallel themes going on
Yes,
here,
yes.
that our children can always give us a title of a book that they are reading.
Excellent.
Ah.
And so they have to do that in under 3 seconds, basically, because then we know they're really reading it, right?
Right, right.
I'm
Because
gonna
you
use
know-
that.
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
that's cruel.
it's
That's just cruel.
I like that.
it's cruel. So,
I'm recording
it's terribly
it.
cruel.
Yeah.
So,
That should be a
I'm
tip
getting
that goes
nervous.
across the screen.
She has raven black hair and she's cruel. I'm a little concerned. This is maybe too close to home.
too personal?
Do you have
Right?
piercing dark eyes?
Oh, my God.
Too personal.
Do you have knuckly fingers?
Knuckly fingers, long, thin, white fingers. So that, it's too bad that you just have these three. I want to send you the
Well,
whole
we
book
wanna see
now
more.
and
Send
come
it to
back.
us, yes.
Any more questions?
More. I'm curious about the missing bracelet of the title, how it ties
yeah.
into this
Dun, dun,
bookstore
dun.
visit.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
There were so many parts that I wanted to send, and the dilemma is, do you send a part that that doesn't really need critiquing, that you think is already great, or do you send a part where you
Oh, no,
really
we'll
are
find
looking
something
for
wrong.
correction?
Juicy.
And I was told,
No, we'll find something
Well,
wrong
if you
with
think
it.
about...
We will.
But if you think
And
about
we'll
what
find
came...
Mr. Prince.
you'll find
If you think
something.
It was
about what
hard
came
for
up
this one,
today, right?
Yeah.
With how you really want to do your voice, and as Ed brought up that,
Right.
and Jen was saying more from Miss Lily's point of view,
Yeah.
that would come out, that's an important
Yeah.
point, and that would come out
Yeah.
no matter what piece you brought.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
More general.
I don't know, I think it's a good
Yeah.
idea to bring your best foot forward, and then you go from there.
Right.
So,
Well, thank you so much.
thank you for coming.
Really.
We really
Thank you.
loved
It was
having
very
you.
enjoyable.
Wonderful
Really
writing.
appreciate your time.
Wonderful
That's all. Thank
writing.
you.
So thank you everyone for joining us for this great session of Writers Infusion, and we'll see you next time. Keep writing.
I love your
Would you post-
writing voice, is beautiful, really.
Would you post the next chapter? I want to hear the reaction of
What succeeds
Yes.
is,
Yes.
yes.
the little
Yeah.
girl in the creepy story. I want to know what
It's
the.
a touching dialogue, and what I wanted to do with
It is dialogue,
was,
good.
was to actually shed